see how other data is going to fit into the picture. So we're going through a process initially of planning and designing and prototyping. And that's something that we found works best when it is fairly iterative. I mean, our experience has been that one of the features of housing associations, particularly the smaller ones, is that they don't necessarily have experience of GIS, of putting things on maps, of visualizing data, and so it's very hard for us, and probably fairly pointless for us, to go away, take all their data, analyze it, put it on a map, go back to them and say, here you are, because they don't really know until they see the end result how they're going to use it, what they're going to want, how they're going to combine it with other data. So our tendency has been to just do something pretty simple to start with. So, okay, well, here's your base data on map. Let's regard that as the starting point rather than the end point, and let's work iteratively together. Now we've got the platform up and running to put some more data up there to say, well, actually, I don't want it aggregated to this area, I want it aggregated to that area, and to build a platform which supports that kind of iterative development. Now that's, again, I'm not saying that's right for every situation, but where the experience isn't there for us to get those answers at the beginning of the process, we need to build in support to getting those answers along the process. So that's our sort of kicking off point. Quantum GIS again pops up here as a tool just to be able to very quickly, very easily get mapping data visualized on a map, show it to people without having to build websites or publish anything. It's very much, as Joe was saying, I think, a great tool for non-GIS end users to work with and to be able to play with, and to be able to say, well, okay, if you find it interesting, download it, use it, I'll give you a bit of support and get it up and running. Off you go. I ran a training session over a week internally for some users, and none of them had ever used GIS before. And by the end of it, they were up and running after about 3 hours. So a plug there for Quantum GIS. Again, that's our experience has been that it's been a useful tool for that purpose, and certainly useful during this sort of development stage where we're not worrying too much about what the end product is going to be, but we are trying to work out what the appropriate process is to be, and do the sort of design and planning work that's going to give us the right result. Once we've done all that, what we do want to do with these housing associations is to publish their data so that within the housing association, within the staff complement, they've got access to it. So then we move into this more sort of technical phase, I guess, of store and deliver and publish, which I'll come on to and describe in a bit more detail. But I think it's worth just having an idea of the separation between those processes, and not to think that simply kind of getting the stuff out there is all that needs to be done. So let me look in a bit more detail, and this is where I'm going to describe exactly what we're doing, the packages that we're using, and talk a bit about our experiences with those packages. I will show you the application, subject to the usual provisos about demos, but the application should be up and running, so I'll show you that before the end of the session. So what we're trying to do, we've got some data, we've just got access data, we're trying to get it to the website so that users can look at it. That's our sort of start and end point. I mean, what we actually do is load it up into a database, and the database we use is PostGIS, which we find is fun. It's the kind of database of default for open source GIS. There are others that we could use, as Joe and others I'm sure have said, but PostGIS, I mean, A, it works, B, it seems that quite a lot of other tools, that open source GIS tools, know about PostGIS, can communicate with PostGIS, so it just makes life an awful lot easier further down the road if you've got tools which will load stuff up for you, which will read PostGIS data, where you don't have to worry about a whole lot of integration stuff because somebody's already done it. So our path is very much the path of least resistance. So that's certainly been our experience, that PostGIS is part of that path. There are interfaces. You're not talking here about getting into command line stuff, although you can. I mean, you may need to write some SQL, but actually you can get a long way just by using plugins and interfaces from other programs. We do very little sort of coding with PostGIS. We just load stuff up and use it, not doing anything very sophisticated. This middle bit is all about configuring and styling. So this is about, okay, we've got our data out there. We need to make it available to client machines, to websites in a way that of our choosing. So we put everything in the database. It's then a question of choosing, making a selection, a subset of what's in the database, and putting the configuration on it, and crucially putting the styling on it. And this is where GeoServer has capabilities. GeoServer allows you to load styles, to edit styles, to load styles that have been used, that have been generated from other applications. So again, there's some sort of compatibility there, although not necessarily always quite as easy as that. And you can then, in effect, make available to your application, your web application, a library of configured layers, which you can then pull down and select and drop into websites as you wish. So GeoServer is the sort of delivery part of things. And GeoServer has, for me, the great advantage of being a web application with a web interface. So again, there is no configuration unless you're into sort of command line or file configuration. You don't have to do that. There's a series of web pages. It's all form-based. You click, tick, and all that stuff. Drop-down lists. It does make it, relatively speaking, easy to do. And although there are other alternatives to GeoServer, and I wouldn't say that this is the best, but I found it's the best just in terms of being able to use it, and that gets a lot of points with me. And finally, we're into presentation, so we need to deliver this stuff up to the website. And here we're into the way we've approached it is JavaScript libraries, open layers, as probably had a mention. I would have mentioned today. GeoX,